The courtroom was silent. So silent you could hear the hum of the cameras capturing history in the making. Across from Judge Judy sat a woman whose arrogance could have powered an entire city. Her name was Victoria Haines, the 38-year-old CEO of a multi-billion-dollar tech empire. And she had just declared herself a god among ordinary people. 43 seconds later, that same woman would be trembling, mascara streaking down her cheeks, as Judge Judy tore through her delusion of invincibility with words so precise they felt like scalpels. But before the gavel fell, before the courtroom erupted into gasps, heard around the world, Victoria's smug grin dared the judge to challenge her. "I don't answer to you," she said, her tone dripping with the kind of superiority that only power and money can buy. "I create the rules. People like you just follow them." The audience, half horrified, half thrilled, leaned forward in their seats. They'd seen arrogance before on daytime television, but never this flavor. Calculated, corporate, and utterly without fear. Judge Judy didn't flinch. Her eyes locked on Victoria's like a hawk spotting prey a mile away. "You might run a company," she said, her voice low and steady, "but in my courtroom I run you." What happened next would become one of the most replayed moments in courtroom television history. Within days, it would rack up 60 million views across social media. News outlets would call it the day ego met execution. And yet, no one watching that morning had any idea that Judge Judy already knew. Something Victoria didn't, something buried deep in corporate filings and private testimony that would obliterate the so-called goddess's empire before the episode even aired. So buckle up, because you're about to witness the moment when arrogance met accountability and lost everything. If you believe in justice that humbles the proud, smash that like button right now. And stay tuned, because what Judge Judy uncovers about Victoria Haines will make you question everything you think you know about power, privilege, and what happens when someone thinks they're above the law. Before the cameras rolled that morning, the production team expected a routine civil case, something simple to fill a 22-minute slot between the usual landlord disputes and petty contract squabbles. Instead, they found themselves staring at a defendant whose arrival looked more like a red carpet premiere than a courtroom summons. Victoria Haines, founder and CEO of Haines Dynamics, stepped out of a black Rolls-Royce in a tailored white suit that cost more than most people's annual rent. Paparazzi flashes reflected off her diamond-encrusted watch as she waved to curious bystanders. Reporters had caught wind that the youngest self-made female tech billionaire was appearing on Judge Judy's show, and Victoria loved every second of it. Inside the courtroom, a very different scene was unfolding. At the plaintiff's table sat Eleanor Brooks, a quiet systems engineer who had worked for Haines Dynamics since the company's early days. She wasn't famous, she wasn't rich, and she definitely didn't want cameras in her face. All she wanted was the $48,000 in unpaid bonuses Victoria's company had promised her, after she exposed a massive cybersecurity flaw that could have cost clients millions. Instead of a reward, Eleanor had been fired within 48 hours. The official reason, breach of confidentiality. Unofficially, she'd embarrassed her CEO. Elena's eyes stayed glued to the documents trembling in her hands, while Victoria casually checked her reflection in the camera lens. To Victoria, this was a stage, an opportunity to prove that even television judges bowed before her intellect. The bailiff's announcement cut through the murmurs. "All rise." Judge Judy entered, every step deliberate, her gaze sweeping over both women like a radar scanning for weakness. The audience rose with her, a living tide of anticipation. She settled into her chair, tapped her gavel once, and the room fell into reverent silence. "Case number 1187, the clerk read. Eleanor Brooks versus Haines Dynamics Incorporated, represented by CEO Victoria Haines. The moment Judy looked down at the case file, her brow tightened. She'd handled hundreds of employment disputes, but few involved billion-dollar executives defending themselves in small claims court. "Ms. Brooks," she said, "you're suing your former employer for unpaid compensation related to a security discovery. Correct?" "Yes, Your Honor." Elena's voice was barely audible. "They promised a performance bonus if we detected vulnerabilities before launch. I did, and they refused to pay." Judge Judy's gaze slid toward Victoria. "And you, Ms. Haines, are representing your company personally?" Victoria's smile flashed, dazzling but cold. Of course. I don't need lawyers to speak for me. I'm quite capable of defending my own empire. That one word, empire, hung in the air like a challenge. The judge arched an eyebrow. Empire, We'll see. What the audience didn't yet know was that the empire Victoria boasted about was crumbling behind the scenes. Half her board of directors had resigned. Federal regulators were already sniffing around her company's accounting practices. And the bonus dispute now sitting before Judge Judy was about to expose something far darker than unpaid wages. Judge Judy could sense it before she even read the fine print. Years of experience had trained her to smell deceit the way bloodhounds smell fear. She didn't know the details yet, but her instincts told her that the woman across from her wasn't just arrogant. She was hiding something big. So when Victoria flashed her smile and said, "I'm looking forward to teaching you how corporate law really works," Judy simply leaned back, folded her hands and replied with quiet amusement, "Oh, I love being taught, Ms. Haines, especially by people who think they're gods." The audience chuckled softly. Victoria didn't. And as the cameras zoomed in on her confident smirk, none of them realized that Judge Judy's team had already done their own digging. By the end of the episode, those files would turn that smirk into panic. Behind the scenes, before Victoria Haines even set foot in that courtroom, Judge Judy's research team had already spent 3 days combing through public records, financial statements and employee testimonies. Something about the case had raised red flags from the start. It wasn't every day that a billionaire personally appeared in small claims court over $48,000. The math didn't add up, and Judy knew that when money doesn't make sense, power and ego are usually the real currency. The deeper her staff dug, the stranger it got. Publicly, Haines Dynamics was a darling of Silicon Valley, a company that claimed to revolutionize cybersecurity with unbreakable AI firewalls. But the company's internal financial documents told a different story: sudden layoffs, delayed payrolls, and unexplained cash transfers routed through shell subsidiaries in Luxembourg and Singapore. Then came the whistleblower reports. Anonymous emails from former engineers described a culture of fear and silence, where Victoria ruled by intimidation and humiliation. One former employee had even written, "She calls herself a god in the office. She says people should be grateful to exist in her presence." That phrase stuck with Judge Judy like a splinter. When she heard Victoria repeat it during pre-trial interviews, "In my company, I'm the creator, and creators don't owe explanations to their creations," the veteran judge knew exactly what kind of person she was dealing with. She'd seen this archetype before. The narcissistic executive who believed success was a divine right, not a privilege earned, and Judy had a plan. While Victoria's PR team was busy preparing talking points for the cameras, Judge Judy's assistant, Officer Bird, delivered a sealed manila envelope to the bench the morning of the hearing. Inside was a confidential witness statement from none other than Haines Dynamics' former CFO. The contents were explosive. A signed affidavit confirming that Victoria had personally ordered bonuses withheld from employees who failed to demonstrate worshipful loyalty. The CFO's final note read, "She doesn't see staff as humans, only tools. And tools don't deserve rewards." Judge Judy didn't show her reaction. She simply slid the affidavit back into the envelope and placed it beside the case file, hidden in plain sight. When the cameras started rolling and Victoria began her performance, her immaculate posture, her perfectly rehearsed confidence, Judy already knew that the so-called goddess's downfall was a matter of when, not if. From her bench, Judy observed everything: the way Victoria spoke over Elena, the dismissive flick of her wrist, the self-satisfied grin that appeared whenever the audience reacted to her clever remarks. It was all evidence, just not the kind written on paper. Judge Judy's mind worked like a chess player seeing 12 moves ahead. She wouldn't confront Victoria immediately. No, that would be too merciful. She'd let her talk, let her boast, let her believe she was winning. Then, right when Victoria reached her peak of arrogance, Judy would spring the trap. Meanwhile, Elena Brooks sat quietly, unaware of the storm gathering in her favor. Her lawyer had warned her that Haines Dynamics' legal department would make her look like an ungrateful ex-employee, maybe even a saboteur. But she had no idea that Judge Judy had already seen through the entire corporate smokescreen. Out in the hallway, the show's producers whispered among themselves, "She's dangerous," one of them said about Victoria. "Did you hear how she talked to the cameraman like he was her intern?" Another replied, "Yeah, but wait till Judy gets to her. That woman's not walking out the same way she came in." And they were right, because while Victoria Haines strutted into that courtroom to humiliate a former employee, Judge Judy had walked in to teach a lesson that would echo through boardrooms and social media feeds for years to come. "Power without integrity," Judy once told her staff, "is just arrogance waiting for a reckoning." And that reckoning was about to begin. If Victoria Haines was the storm, Elena Brooks was the quiet before it, the kind of calm that hides 1,000 small wounds. The camera lingered on her for a moment as she adjusted her glasses, her trembling, fingers clutching a folder so worn that the corners had frayed. Inside that folder were 2 years of her life, late-night emails, bonus agreements, and one final message that had ended her career. For Elena, this wasn't about the money anymore. It was about reclaiming her dignity. Before Haines Dynamics became a tech empire, it had been 5 people working out of a rented garage, eating takeout and sleeping beside computers. Eleanor had been one of those 5. She'd written the code that formed the backbone of the company's first product, an AI-driven firewall that caught the attention of investors. When Victoria Haines gave her the "We're going to change the world" speech, Eleanor had believed her. And she had worked like it. 70-hour weeks, skipped holidays and nights spent staring at error logs until dawn. Her only motivation had been the promise Victoria repeated at every meeting: "When we win, we all win together." But the moment the company hit its first billion-dollar valuation, that promise vanished like smoke. Raises disappeared. Bonuses were postponed indefinitely. When Elena reported a serious vulnerability in their flagship product, one that could have exposed millions of users' personal data, Victoria didn't thank her. She punished her. "You made me look incompetent," Victoria had said in front of the entire engineering team. "Do you understand who I am? I built this company. I am this company. You don't correct God in her own temple." Those words had been seared into Elena's memory. Within 48 hours, her company ID was disabled, her email wiped, and her reputation quietly smeared with whispers of insubordination. The severance check never came. Neither did the promised bonus. When Judge Judy asked Elena to explain her side, her voice wavered at first. "Your Honor, I was one of the first hires. I believed in the company and her vision. I didn't even care about money at first. I just wanted to build something important. But every time I stood up for what was right, I got punished for it." Judge Judy nodded, eyes sharp but sympathetic. "Did you receive any written agreement for the bonus?" "Yes, Your Honor." Eleanor flipped through her folder, producing a printout of an internal memo signed by Victoria herself. The words were simple. "Security team members identifying high-level vulnerabilities before product launch will receive a $48,000 retention bonus." Judy took the document, examined the signature, then turned her gaze to Victoria. "Is this your signature?" Victoria smiled faintly. "It might be. I sign hundreds of documents. That doesn't mean they all apply. We have internal policies. Context matters." "Context," Judy repeated slowly, setting the paper down. "That's an interesting word, because in this context, it looks a lot like a promise," the audience murmured. Victoria crossed her legs, unbothered. "Promises are for employees who stay loyal, Judge. Loyalty isn't a paycheck, it's a privilege." Elena's composure cracked for the first time. "I was loyal. I worked every weekend, every holiday. I gave that company my health. And when I found a flaw that could have destroyed it, I reported it. I didn't leak it, I protected it." Her voice broke, tears cutting through her restraint. The cameras zoomed closer, every emotion raw, unfiltered, painfully real. For a long moment, Judge Judy said nothing. She just studied Elena, the way she had studied countless victims of corporate abuse before, people chewed up by systems built to protect the powerful. Finally, Judy spoke, her tone calm but cutting. "Ms. Brooks, you don't need to justify integrity. The problem isn't what you did. It's that you did it in a world where power confuses obedience for respect." A low murmur swept through the courtroom, part sympathy, part anticipation. Victoria rolled her eyes. Please, let's not turn this into a motivational speech. She violated confidentiality, cost us investor confidence, and now she's crying on television to play the victim. That's all this is. But in that moment, the audience wasn't seeing a victim. They were seeing courage, a woman standing up to the person who'd crushed her and saying, "Enough," and Judge Judy saw it too. The emotional balance of the room had shifted. The villain still believed she was in control, but everyone else, viewers, audience, and judge alike, could feel it. Her downfall had already begun. Victoria Haines didn't just believe she was above the law, she believed she was the law. As Elena wiped her tears, Victoria leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs with the practiced ease of someone posing for a Forbes cover shoot. Her diamond bracelet caught the courtroom light, reflecting tiny stars across the bench. "Your Honor," she said in a voice that managed to sound both polite and poisonous, "I understand that emotions run high when people lose their jobs. But business isn't about feelings, it's about results. And frankly, Ms. Brooks was a liability. If I hadn't removed her, she could have destroyed years of work. I saved my company. I saved my employees. That's leadership." Judge Judy tilted her head slightly, watching her like a lion watching a gazelle that hadn't realized it was already cornered. "Leadership," she echoed. "Interesting definition." But Victoria was just warming up. She smirked, straightened her blazer, and launched into a monologue that could have doubled as a TED Talk on narcissism. "You see, Judge," she began, "people like me, innovators, aren't bound by the same limits as everyone else. I built something from nothing. I created jobs, opportunities, technology that literally protects lives. So when someone accuses me of something as trivial as not paying a bonus, forgive me if I find it laughable. I don't owe gratitude to employees who undermine me." Gasps rippled through the courtroom audience. Even the bailiff glanced sideways, eyebrows raised. Victoria smiled at the reaction, mistaking disgust for admiration. "I'm not here to be liked. I'm here because I thought it would be fun. You know, educational. For your viewers." The way she said "your viewers" made it sound like an insult. Judge Judy didn't respond immediately. She just leaned back, tapping her pen on the bench. Every rhythm, every pause was calculated. She'd seen people like Victoria before, people who mistook arrogance for intellect, cruelty for confidence. They always started loud. They always ended small. Victoria continued, now gesturing dramatically with manicured fingers. "I have entire legal teams who handle real litigation. But this is performance art. The optics are good for the brand. The world gets to see what a confident, successful woman looks like when she refuses to be bullied by the system." The audience murmured again. The arrogance was breathtaking. "You keep saying the system," Judge Judy said, her tone deceptively calm. "What system are you referring to?" "The system that hates people like me," Victoria replied instantly. "Powerful women, visionaries, we intimidate people, especially those who've never accomplished anything meaningful." The implication hung in the air. For the first time, Judy's eyes narrowed. "Are you implying that I am intimidated by you, Ms. Haines?" Victoria smiled sweetly, tilting her head. "Of course not, Your Honor. I'm sure you're very accomplished. For your generation." A sharp inhale echoed from the gallery. Even Elena looked stunned. Judge Judy didn't move. She didn't need to. Her stillness was more terrifying than any outburst could have been. Victoria mistook the silence for victory. She turned toward the camera and smiled, whispering to herself, "Viral moment achieved." But behind that smile, cracks were forming. The camera zoomed in, catching the subtle twitch in her jaw, the faint tremor in her fingers. Because beneath all that ego, even Victoria could sense it. The temperature in the room had changed. Judy's expression was unreadable, her face carved from pure composure. But her mind was racing ahead. She'd seen every type of arrogance, but this was something different. This was spiritual delusion disguised as corporate ambition. "Ms. Haines," she said finally, voice low and deliberate, "in my courtroom, you're not a CEO, a visionary, or a god. You're a defendant. And when defendants lie, manipulate, or condescend, they don't intimidate me. They entertain me." The audience erupted into applause before the bailiff silenced them. Victoria blinked, momentarily caught off guard. Her lips tightened, but she recovered quickly. "Oh, I'm not lying, Judge. I don't need to." I create my own truth, that was it. The words that would later headline every news article, every meme, every viral clip. I create my own truth. They would be repeated millions of times across social media, dissected by psychologists, debated by pundits, and used as shorthand for the fall of a woman who thought she was untouchable. But at that moment in that courtroom, they were simply gasoline, and Judge Judy was holding the match. Judge Judy Scheindlin had been in courtrooms longer than most of her audience had been alive. She'd seen every mask arrogance could wear, the slick salesman, the manipulative ex, the fake victim. But Victoria Haines was a rare breed. Her arrogance wasn't a shield. It was a religion. From the moment Victoria walked in, Judy's instincts had begun cataloguing details like evidence at a crime scene, the subtle eye rolls when the plaintiff spoke, the carefully timed smiles aimed at the camera, the constant need to turn every question into a sermon about herself. It was all there, the unmistakable body language of someone who believed power excused everything. Judy had spent decades studying people who thought their status made them special. The more they talked, the clearer their cracks became. And as Victoria continued her verbal parade of self-importance, Judy could already see where to strike. Every narcissist, Judy once told her producers, writes their own confession. You just have to let them talk long enough to sign it. That's exactly what she was doing now. She'd seen it all before, Wall Street executives pretending ignorance, crooked landlords twisting words, con artists crying crocodile tears when they were caught. But this was different. This was a woman who genuinely believed she was above human consequence. To the world, Judge Judy was a TV personality. But behind that television polish was a legal mind forged in one of New York's toughest family courts. She'd stared down violent offenders, pathological liars, and people who thought they could out-talk justice. None of them had ever succeeded. So when Victoria smirked and said, "I create my own truth," Judy didn't react outwardly. Inwardly, though, she smiled. That one sentence was all the confirmation she needed. The kind of arrogance that makes someone think they can rewrite reality always ends the same way, then collapse. She glanced down at the sealed manila folder resting beside her. Inside were the financial statements, whistleblower testimonies, and the ex-CFO's affidavit she'd quietly reviewed before the cameras started rolling. Every piece of it was a nail waiting for the right moment to strike the coffin, but Judy wasn't going to rush it. Justice wasn't just about truth. It was about timing. Her plan was already in motion. Let Victoria dig herself deep enough that even the gods she claimed kinship with couldn't pull her out. Out of the corner of her eye, she noticed the audience. Some were shaking their heads in disbelief. Others leaned forward, captivated by the spectacle of watching a billionaire humiliate herself. But Judy wasn't interested in spectacle. She was interested in lessons. She'd built her entire career on one unshakable belief, that the law is the great equalizer. It doesn't care about your money, your title, or your ego. It only cares about right and wrong, and if you cross that line in her courtroom, there are no excuses. She let her gaze linger on Victoria a moment longer. The woman was still speaking, still trying to turn the trial into her personal masterclass on leadership. But all Judy heard was desperation hiding behind eloquence. "Do you know what fascinates me, Ms. Haines?" Judy finally interrupted, her tone cool and deceptively casual. "People who believe they're untouchable often say that right before they're touched by reality." Victoria chuckled, assuming it was a joke. "Judge, with all due respect, I've dealt with regulators, investors, politicians. They all want to control people like me. It never works." "Oh, don't worry," Judy said softly. "I don't want to control you. I want to understand how a person convinces herself that morality doesn't apply to her." The air in the room shifted again, not loud, not obvious, but unmistakable. Even Victoria's PR manager, seated behind her, fidgeted nervously. Because those who knew Judge Judy knew that when her tone dropped like that, quiet, steady, curious, it wasn't calm. It was the warning before the hurricane. As Victoria started another monologue about visionary independence, Judy's eyes flicked once more toward the manila envelope. She didn't open it yet, but her fingers rested on its edge, like a general ready to unsheath a weapon. Inside that envelope lay the truth that would shatter Victoria's delusion of godhood, and it was only a matter of time before Judy decided the moment had come. But for now, she waited calm and patient. Because the beauty of justice, Judy often said, fears not in how fast it happens. It's in how completely it lands when it finally does. And when this one landed, it would be biblical. The camera panned across the courtroom as the tension thickened into something electric. The audience could feel it, like static before a lightning strike. Judge Judy sat motionless behind her bench, her gavel resting lightly in her hand. The bailiff gave a small nod to the producer. The red light on the camera blinked to life. They were live. This was the moment both women had been waiting for. "Let's begin," Judge Judy said, her voice carrying that unmistakable edge, half invitation, half warning. "Ms. Brooks, you've made your statement. Now we'll hear from the defendant." Victoria Haines rose with theatrical precision, smoothing her designer skirt as if she were walking onto a stage instead of into judgment. She moved like she owned the oxygen in the room. Her posture screamed confidence, her expression carefully curated for the cameras. When she spoke, it was with the cadence of a CEO delivering a keynote speech. "Your Honor," she began, flashing a polished smile. "First of all, thank you for allowing me to speak. I know you're busy and I respect your time. I wish everyone in this courtroom shared that respect." The jab was subtle, but it landed. Eleanor looked down at her notes, biting her lip. The audience murmured. Judge Judy's brow furrowed slightly, just enough to signal she'd caught it. Victoria continued, "This case is not about bonuses or broken promises. It's about performance, accountability. When I founded Haines Dynamics, I built it from the ground up with my own vision. That's not ego, that's fact. And I refuse to let disgruntled ex-employees, people who couldn't keep up, rewrite my story." "Rewrite your story?" Judy asked. Her tone was almost amused. "Yes, Your Honor," Victoria said, her eyes flashing with self-righteous fire. "People like Ms. Brooks think they deserve rewards for mediocrity. They mistake compliance for contribution. And when they're finally held accountable, suddenly they're victims." "Held accountable how?" Judy asked. "By being fired without pay for finding a security flaw that could have cost your customers millions?" Victoria gave a small patronizing laugh. "Your Honor, that's not how innovation works. You can't punish a company for making executive decisions." Judy leaned forward, elbows on the bench, her tone cool and deceptively soft. "Executive decisions that break contractual agreements?" "I didn't break anything," Victoria said. "I simply adjusted expectations. That's what leadership looks like. And if your viewers want a villain in this story, fine, make me the villain. But villains build empires while the rest of the world complains about fairness." A hush fell over the courtroom. The arrogance was breathtaking. Judy's pen tapped once, twice against her notepad. The rhythm echoed like a countdown. "Ms. Haines," she said slowly, "you seem to think this is a business seminar." "It's not. It's a court of law. So instead of speeches, let's talk facts." The CEO smirked. "I'm always ready for facts." "Good," Judy said. "Then explain this." She held up a document from the file Elena had provided, a printed email chain. "This is an internal message from you, dated March 17th, 2023. The subject line reads, 'Silencing the security team.' Would you like me to read it aloud?" The confidence on Victoria's face flickered for just a moment before she forced a smile. "I send a lot of emails, Your Honor. Context matters." "Oh, I'm sure it does," Judy replied. "Because in this context you wrote, and I quote, 'No one undermines me in my company. If they question me again, they're gone.'" She looked up, eyes sharp as glass. "Did you write that, Ms. Haines?" Victoria hesitated, then said, "I may have, but you're twisting it. That was internal communication. Motivation, not threat." Judy's voice dropped half an octave. "It reads like intimidation to me." The audience murmured again. Victoria's jaw tightened. "You're misinterpreting my tone." "Oh, don't worry," Judy said dryly. "I've been reading tone longer than you've been giving press conferences." The gallery erupted in laughter before the bailiff called for order. For the first time, Victoria looked unsettled. Her posture stiffened. Her hands clenched around the edge of the table. Still, she forced another smile and tried to regain the upper hand. "Your Honor, with all due respect," she said, "you can't run a billion-dollar company by asking for permission every time someone gets their feelings hurt." "I'm not apologizing for being strong." Judy's eyes didn't move. "Strong is good, but cruel is something else." "Cruel?" Victoria snapped. Do you have any idea what it takes to be me? The pressure, the sacrifice, the expectations. People worship success until it stares them in the face, and then they call it arrogance. Judy leaned back. And when they don't worship you, you call yourself God. A ripple moved through the crowd. Even the cameras seemed to pause on her words. Victoria froze. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Excuse me? Judy repeated, cool as steel. I said you call yourself God. Isn't that what you said to your employees? Victoria opened her mouth, then closed it. That was taken out of context. Context again, Judy said. It's funny how often that word comes up right before the truth does. A few quiet chuckles from the audience broke the tension. But Victoria wasn't laughing anymore. Her eyes darted toward her PR manager, who avoided her gaze. The confidence that once filled the room like oxygen was thinning fast. Judge Judy shuffled her papers and set them down. Let's take a 5-minute recess, she said. I'd like to review something before we continue. The gavel hit. The sound was final. As the courtroom buzzed with whispers, Victoria turned sharply toward her assistant. Get me the PR memo, she hissed. Now. But across the room, Elena sat quietly, clutching her folder, and for the first time since this ordeal began, she smiled, because she could see it. The cracks were showing, and Judy had only just begun. The tension in the courtroom returned heavier than before, thick enough to taste. 5 minutes had passed, but to Victoria it felt like an eternity. She had spent those minutes whispering furiously with her PR consultant, pacing in small controlled circles, and practicing her calm smile in the reflection of a water pitcher. When the bailiff announced, "All rise," she was ready again, or at least, she thought she was. Judge Judy re-entered the courtroom, carrying not just the manila folder from earlier, but an entirely new file, one the cameras hadn't seen before. Her expression was unreadable, controlled, dangerous. Victoria straightened, flashing her polished smile again, the one that had graced magazine covers and investor reports. She even gave a little wave toward the gallery, the kind of self-assured gesture that said everything is still under my control. Be seated, Judge Judy said, her tone clipped and cool. She opened the folder in front of her, leafing through several printed sheets before speaking again. Ms. Haines, Judy began, you mentioned before the recess that your comment about being God was taken out of context. Do you still stand by that statement? Absolutely, Victoria said confidently. That remark was metaphorical, a motivational tool. Taken literally, it sounds absurd. Indeed it does, Judy replied, her tone laced with quiet irony. But here's the thing, Ms. Haines. She lifted one of the papers from the new folder. The court received a statement this morning from a former employee, an HR director from Haines Dynamics. She describes a mandatory company meeting held on January 8, 2023. Does that date sound familiar to you? Victoria frowned, her perfect confidence flickering. We hold dozens of meetings. I don't recall specifics. Oh, I think you'll remember this one, Judy said, because during that meeting, you allegedly stood in front of your staff and said, quote, "There are no gods above me. I am the creator of your success. I decide who rises and who falls." The audience gasped audibly. Victoria's lips parted, but no words came out. Her eyes darted between Judy and the cameras, searching for an angle, a way to spin it. That's ridiculous, she said finally, her laugh brittle. Completely fabricated. I never said that. Oh, I thought you might say that, Judy said, her tone cooling another degree. That's why I verified it. She nodded to the bailiff, who stepped forward and placed a small audio recorder on the bench. This, Judy said, was submitted by that same HR director. A recording taken during that meeting. I reviewed it during recess. Victoria went pale. That's illegal. No, Ms. Haines, Judy interrupted sharply. It's not. Not when recorded in a public employee meeting in the state of California. She pressed play. The sound of muffled voices filled the courtroom speakers. Then, clear as day, Victoria's voice rang out, sharp, commanding, and dripping with superiority. I am the system. I am the creator of this company. When I say something is done, it is law. I'm not asking for belief. I am belief. I am God here. The courtroom erupted. Some audience members gasped. Others covered their mouths in shock. Even the cameraman froze for a split second, instinctively zooming in on Victoria's face. the face of a woman watching her empire crumble in real time. "Turn that off!" Victoria shouted suddenly, slamming her hands on the table. "That's taken out of context." "You can't—" "Sit down," Judge Judy barked. The command cracked through the courtroom like thunder. For a split second, Victoria didn't move. She just stared at Judy, her jaw tight, her nostrils flaring. Then, slowly, she sat back down, her movements stiff and mechanical. Judy waited for the silence to settle. Then she leaned forward, her eyes sharp as a scalpel. "You know, Ms. Haines," she said, "I've met a lot of narcissists in my time. People who think they're above the law, above truth, above decency. But I've never seen someone so eager to prove it on tape." Victoria tried to regain control, but her voice betrayed her, trembling around the edges. "Your Honor, that's motivational language. You're twisting—" "Stop," Judy said flatly. "You can't motivate people by demeaning them. You don't inspire trust by calling yourself divine. You don't build loyalty by playing God. You build cults, not companies." The audience applauded, unable to help themselves. The bailiff called for order, but it was too late. The tide had turned completely. Victoria looked around desperately, first at the cameras, then at the audience, then finally at her assistant, who suddenly found the floor very interesting. Her empire wasn't slipping anymore. It was falling, and Judge Judy was about to make sure it never rose again. When the applause finally faded, a heavy silence took its place. The kind that doesn't just quiet a room, it crushes it. Judge Judy leaned back in her chair, steepling her fingers. "You know," she said calmly, "I always find it fascinating when people in power forget that evidence has a longer memory than ego." Victoria sat rigid, her once flawless composure starting to fracture. The high-gloss confidence that carried her through every boardroom, every interview, every magazine feature, was gone. In its place was something new, fear disguised as fury. "That recording doesn't mean anything," she said, her voice rising. "It was taken by a disgruntled employee. People twist my words all the time. I'm a public figure. You of all people should understand how the media distorts things." "Oh, I understand distortion just fine," Judy replied. Her tone sharpened to a blade's edge. "I just happen to recognize the difference between distortion and documentation." She opened the manila folder, the same one that had been sitting beside her since the start of the hearing. The audience leaned in. Cameras zoomed closer. This was the moment. Judy lifted the first page. "Let's go over what we have here, shall we?" Exhibit A, an internal financial memo signed by you, Ms. Haines, and dated 6 days after you terminated Ms. Brooks. In it, you approved a $250,000 executive bonus. For yourself. The color drained from Victoria's face. "That's standard compensation," she began. "Not when the funds came directly from the employee performance pool," Judy cut in, her voice booming like a gavel before the gavel. "The same pool that included Ms. Brooks' unpaid bonus." Victoria's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Judy pressed on. "Exhibit B," she said, holding up a second document, "is a whistleblower affidavit from your former CFO who resigned 3 months ago. It details a pattern of financial manipulation, including falsified reports to investors." Victoria's jaw tightened. "He's lying." "He was fired for incompetence." Judy's lips twitched, not quite a smile, more like the faintest glimmer of amusement. "Of course he was. Everyone who tells the truth about you seems to have a performance issue, don't they?" The audience chuckled quietly, but Judy's eyes stayed locked on Victoria. "Exhibit C," Judy continued, "emails between you and your PR director discussing how to pre-spin potential employee lawsuits as jealous attacks." Victoria's voice broke. "Those were private strategy discussions. That's not evidence, that's business." "Oh no," Judy said, her voice soft now, the softness of thunder just before the strike. "That's not business, Ms. Haines, that's deceit. That's coercion. That's what happens when people mistake fear for loyalty." Victoria slammed her hand on the table. "You don't understand what it takes to lead. You've never built anything." "Wrong," Judy snapped, her voice slicing through the air. "I built an entire career holding people like you accountable." The courtroom erupted again. This time no one tried to stop it. Judy waited until the noise died down before delivering the next blow. And finally, Exhibit D. She held up a flash drive, the metallic surface gleaming under the lights. "A digital backup of your company's internal Slack logs." Turns out Ms. Brooks wasn't the only one silenced for questioning your divine authority. Victoria's breathing quickened. Her hands trembled slightly, though she tried to hide it beneath the desk. "Those logs were stolen," she barked. "Subpoenaed," Judy corrected, "and authenticated. Every word, every deleted message, every attempt to cover your tracks." The camera zoomed in as Judy leaned forward, eyes locked like a hunter closing in. "Tell me, Ms. Haines, how does it feel to realize the truth you thought you could rewrite has receipts?" For a long, excruciating moment, Victoria didn't respond. She just stared at the documents, her empire unraveling before her eyes. The mask was gone now. The goddess complex had cracked clean down the middle, revealing the frightened human underneath. She whispered, This is a setup." "No," Judy said evenly. "This is accountability. You can't bully reality into submission. Not here, not ever." Victoria's jaw trembled. "You don't get it. I am the system." Judy tilted her head, studying her like a scientist examining a failed experiment. "Then maybe it's time someone rebooted it." The audience roared with applause. Even the bailiff cracked a smile. Victoria turned red, gripping the edge of the desk. "You can't talk to me like that. I'm not one of your petty defendants. I'm Victoria Haines." Judy slammed her gavel once, silencing her completely. "And I'm the law in this room." The silence that followed was total. You could hear the sound of Victoria's shallow breathing, the distant hum of the lights, the weight of justice hanging heavy in the air. For the first time in her life, Victoria Haines was not in control. And she knew it. Judy leaned back slowly, her expression unreadable. "We'll move to closing statements shortly. But first," she paused just long enough to let the tension build. "There's one more thing you should hear." She signaled the bailiff, who pressed a button on the court's video monitor. The screen flickered to life. Victoria's eyes widened in horror as her own company's security footage appeared. A boardroom meeting, her standing at the head of the table, voice booming through the speakers. "I don't need ethics approvals. I am the ethics. It was over." The audience gasped. Cameras zoomed in on Victoria's frozen face, that perfect CEO mask now shattered. Judge Judy turned to her calmly. "You said earlier you create your own truth. Well, Ms. Haines, I hope you like living in it. Because what I see here is not truth. It's delusion." The lights from the cameras seemed harsher now, slicing through the silence like interrogation lamps. The once impenetrable aura of Victoria Haines, the self-made goddess, the billionaire tech visionary, had disintegrated. Her designer armor looked heavy on her shoulders. Her hands, once so steady, trembled against the polished oak table. Judge Judy let the silence stretch. She had no need to fill it. Silence was her sharpest tool. When people believed they were unstoppable, silence forced them to hear their own collapse. Finally she spoke. "Ms. Haines," she said, her voice calm, measured, and lethal, "you've built a company. I'll give you that. You've convinced investors to trust you, employees to follow you, and the public to idolize you. But all that power, all that money, couldn't buy you one thing you clearly lack: integrity." Victoria looked up, her eyes glistening but defiant. "Integrity," she scoffed. "Integrity doesn't build billion-dollar companies." "Vision does." Judy's eyebrow lifted. "Vision without ethics is blindness, Ms. Haines, and you've been blind for a very long time," the courtroom murmured. Eleanor Brooks, sitting quietly at the plaintiff's table, finally allowed herself to breathe. But Judy wasn't finished. "You stand here claiming divinity," Judy continued, leaning forward slightly, her tone growing heavier with each word. "You tell people you're the creator of their success, the decider of their futures. But a real leader doesn't demand worship. A real leader doesn't silence the people who keep her empire standing." Victoria tried to interject. "You're twisting—" But Judy's hand shot up. "Stop." Her voice hit like a whip. "You've interrupted, deflected, and deceived since the moment you sat down. You think this is a performance? Fine, but understand this. The world is watching, and right now what they see is not a visionary. It's a tyrant wearing lipstick and delusion." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Victoria's face contorted, half fury, half humiliation. "You can't talk to me that way," she snapped. "I've been on magazine covers. I've been praised by presidents. You're just a—" "Careful," Judy warned, her tone suddenly ice-cold. Victoria froze mid-sentence, realizing too late that she'd stepped onto a cliff. Judy's gaze didn't waver. You were about to say something revealing, weren't you? Go ahead, finish the sentence. Victoria's throat tightened. She looked around the room at the cameras, the spectators, the walls closing in. For the first time she looked small. I was going to say, "You're just television?" she said finally, voice trembling with false calm. "Television?" Judy repeated, almost smiling. "That's right, television. A camera in every corner. A record that lasts forever." She leaned forward, her tone lowering into that dangerous whisper that every fan of the show knew meant something final was coming. "You know what happens to people like you on television, Miss Haines? They become examples." Victoria's breath caught. "Examples," Judy continued, "of what arrogance looks like when it meets truth, of what happens when power mistakes itself for morality." She glanced briefly at the plaintiff. "Ms. Brooks, you believed in this woman. You gave her loyalty. You gave her trust. And when you found wrongdoing, she destroyed you to protect her illusion. But today, the illusion ends." Judy turned back to Victoria. "I've seen your type my whole career. People who think fear equals respect, who believe success is proof of righteousness. But the truth is simpler, Ms. Haines. You're not a god. You're a frightened child in an expensive suit, terrified of the moment someone says, 'No.'" Victoria's eyes burned. "You don't know me," she said, her voice shaking. "Oh, but I do," Judy replied softly. "I've known hundreds like you, and every single one ends up in the same place, and alone, angry, and finally forced to look in the mirror without the applause." The courtroom was utterly still. You could almost hear hearts beating. Then Judy delivered the line that would echo across the internet for years to come. "You can build empires on fear, Ms. Haines, but you can't build respect. Fear fades, respect lasts. And when the fear is gone, all that's left is the truth." The silence afterward was absolute. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate, as if unsure whether to move or simply let the moment exist in its full, devastating power. Victoria sat frozen, her face drained of all color. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. Her empire, her confidence, her very identity, all shattered in front of millions. Judy leaned back, voice calm again. "Now let's finish this properly." For a few agonizing seconds, the only sound in the courtroom was the faint hum of the lights. The audience sat frozen, watching as Victoria Haines, the woman who had once declared herself a god, began to unravel. Her manicured hand trembled as she reached for her water glass. It slipped, clattering against the desk, water spilling across the polished surface and onto her neatly stacked documents. The sound echoed like a crack in the foundation of her empire. "Ms. Haines," Judge Judy said softly, "you may respond." But Victoria didn't respond. She stared straight ahead, her eyes unfocused, the 1,000-yard stare of someone who had just realized her world was burning down around her. Then came the denial, the first stage of collapse. "This isn't real," she whispered. You people don't understand how the business world works. You can't destroy me with paperwork. I am Haines Dynamics." Judy didn't move. She just watched, her expression calm, patient, the way a doctor watches a fever break. Victoria rose from her chair, gesturing wildly toward the cameras. "You think this will ruin me? I own the media. I have influence. No one will believe this." "Sit down," Judy said firmly. But Victoria didn't. Her voice grew louder, trembling between rage and panic. "Do you have any idea who I am? I could buy this entire show and have you replaced. You're nothing compared to me." The audience gasped. The bailiff stepped forward instinctively. Judy's voice dropped to that tone that could freeze boiling water. "Sit down." And for the first time, Victoria obeyed, slowly, mechanically, like a puppet whose strings had finally been cut. Her breaths came shallow now. The color had drained from her face, leaving only the hollow echo of arrogance turned to fear. "You built a company," Judy said evenly, "but you never built yourself, and that's why you're falling apart." The words hit harder than any gavel. Victoria tried to speak, but her voice cracked under the weight of it all. I was trying to make something bigger than myself," she whispered. Judy nodded slightly. "And in doing so, you forgot you were human." Her words lingered in the air like scripture. Victoria's eyes glistened. Her defiance crumbled into something raw and unfamiliar. Vulnerability. "You don't know what it's like," she said quietly. "The pressure, the expectation, everyone waiting for you to fail." "I do," Judy replied. "The difference is, I didn't let that expectation turn me into a tyrant." That was it. The final crack. Tears spilled down Victoria's cheeks, streaking her flawless foundation. She turned away from the cameras, hiding her face in trembling hands. The audience, once eager for spectacle, now sat in stunned silence. Even Elena Brooks looked conflicted, torn between justice and pity. Victoria sobbed softly. "I just wanted to be respected," she said. Judy's voice softened, not sympathetic but honest. "Respect isn't something you take, it's something you earn, and you can't buy it with fear." Victoria shook her head, whispering through tears, "I can fix this. I can rebuild." "No," Judy interrupted gently. "You can start over, but not until you tell the truth." The words cut through the fog of denial like sunlight through smoke. For a moment, Victoria just stared at her, the woman she had mocked, dismissed, and underestimated, as if seeing her for the first time. Then finally her voice broke completely. "I lied," she said, barely audible. "I lied about the bonuses, about the reports, about all of it." Judy nodded slowly. "And why did you lie?" Victoria's lip quivered. "Because I thought I could get away with it. I thought I was smarter than everyone else." Judy leaned forward, eyes steady. "And now," Victoria swallowed hard, "now I know I'm not." The gallery erupted into quiet murmurs, the weight of that confession sinking in. The cameras zoomed. Close. Capturing the once untouchable CEO, her face streaked with tears, her voice trembling with the first honest words she'd spoken all day. For years, Victoria Haines had built her empire on dominance and deception. Now, stripped of her power, she was just another person learning the hardest truth of all, that no one, not even a self-proclaimed God, stands above accountability. Judge Judy took a slow breath, her voice returning to its steady, judicial cadence. "Ms. Haines, that's the first real thing you've said since you sat down. I hope you remember how it feels." Victoria nodded weakly, tears still falling. The cameras caught every frame, the billionaire broken by her own reflection. In living rooms across America, people watching would feel it, the strange mixture of justice and tragedy, the fall of arrogance, the rise of truth. The mighty had fallen. But Judy wasn't done yet. She lifted her gavel, eyes unwavering. "Now," she said, "let's make it official." Judge Judy adjusted her glasses, her expression unreadable. The entire room leaned forward, waiting for the inevitable moment, the gavel, the judgment, the final reckoning. When she finally spoke, her tone was surgical, calm, precise, and absolutely final. "Victoria Haines," she began, "this court has heard the evidence, the testimony, and your own admission of guilt. What I've seen today is not just arrogance. It's abuse of power, of trust, and of every person who ever believed in you." Victoria's breathing hitched. Her mascara had long since streaked down her cheeks, but she didn't bother to wipe it away anymore. Judge Judy continued, "You came into this courtroom expecting to win through intimidation. You believed money could rewrite the truth. But in this courtroom, money has no voice, only facts do, and the facts have spoken clearly." She paused for effect. Every syllable felt carved into stone. "This court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Ms. Elena Brooks, for the full amount of damages, $48,000 plus court costs and penalties, totaling $27,000 for willful retaliation and bad faith conduct." A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Elena's hand flew to her mouth, tears welling up. It wasn't just about the money. It was the validation, the acknowledgement that her truth mattered, but Judy wasn't done. "As for you, Ms. Haines," she said, turning her gaze to the fallen CEO, "I'm recommending that this transcript and accompanying evidence be forwarded to the State Attorney General for potential investigation into fraudulent corporate conduct." Victoria froze, her face going pale. The cameras caught the moment, her eyes wide, lips parted, realizing the nightmare was only beginning. Judy continued, her voice unwavering. Because when you use your power to silence the truth, you don't just break contracts. You break trust. And when trust breaks, so does everything built upon it. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the lights above. "Do you have anything to say before I finalize this ruling?" Judy asked. Victoria swallowed hard. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. I don't know what to say," Judy nodded. "Then let me say it for you." She leaned forward, her tone soft but cutting. "What you've learned here today, Ms. Haines, is that power without humility is a self-destruct button. You pressed yours the moment you believed you were untouchable." The audience broke into murmurs of agreement. Some even clapped softly, earning a sharp glare from the bailiff. Judy wasn't gloating. She was teaching. She always was. "You once told your employees that you were a god," Judy said. "But gods don't cry on courtroom floors, Ms. Haines. Humans do. And that's what you are, a human being who's finally met the limits of her own lies." Victoria lowered her head, shoulders shaking. The image of her, the billionaire, the titan, the untouchable, reduced to quiet tears in front of a national audience, was nothing short of cinematic. Judy struck the gavel once. The sound cracked through the air like thunder. "Judgment for the plaintiff," she declared. "Case dismissed." The courtroom erupted. Applause mixed with gasps as cameras zoomed in on Victoria's hollow stare and Elena's quiet relief. The bailiff moved in to clear the courtroom. But the energy, electric, cathartic, lingered in the air like the echo of justice itself. As Victoria stood, Judy delivered one final line, the one that would go viral within hours. "Ms. Haines, I suggest you start learning how to serve something other than yourself. Because the higher you build your ego, the harder it falls when the truth hits it." The gavel came down one last time. The cameras caught it all. The sound, the silence, the look on Victoria's face, the moment the goddess became mortal. Elena turned toward Judy, whispering, "A thank you." Judy simply nodded. "Don't thank me," she said. "Thank the truth. It always shows up, and eventually." And with that she stood and exited the bench, leaving behind a courtroom heavy with the weight of justice finally served. The moment the gavel struck for the last time, the energy in that courtroom became something indescribable, part awe, part relief, part disbelief that they had just witnessed the public unmaking of a corporate titan. But outside those walls, the storm was only beginning. Within minutes of the episode airing, social media detonated. Clips of Judge Judy's takedown, especially the line "Power without humility is a self-destruct button," spread like wildfire across every platform. Hashtags like #TheGodCEO, #JudgeJudy Victoria, and #ArroganceFalls trended globally within hours. Millions of viewers were glued to their screens, replaying the 47 seconds where Victoria Haines's empire cracked on live television. TikTok flooded with reaction videos, people cheering, crying, stitching Judy's quotes into motivational edits set to dramatic orchestral music. Finally, one user commented, "A CEO who actually faces consequences." Another wrote, "Judge Judy just gave a TED Talk on justice in under 5 minutes." The courtroom clip hit 10 million views before midnight. By sunrise, it was 40 million. By the end of the week, every major news outlet had run the story. The Wall Street Journal ran a headline, "CEO who called herself God, brought to her knees by Judge Judy." Business Insider followed with, "When ego meets evidence, the courtroom collapse of Victoria Haines." And perhaps the most viral tweet came from a former Haines Dynamics employee. "I worked for her for 3 years. She told us she was untouchable. Judge Judy just proved otherwise." The fallout inside Haines Dynamics was catastrophic. Within 48 hours of the broadcast, the company's board called an emergency meeting. Investors began pulling out. The firm's stock plummeted 67% in a single trading day. Victoria's inner circle, once loyal to her every word, began leaking internal documents to the press, confirming the financial manipulation Judy had uncovered in court. Then came the resignations. One by one, executives distanced themselves publicly. The former CFO released a statement. "The truth always finds its way to light. I'm just grateful it found the brightest one possible, Judge Judy." Within a week, the Attorney General's office confirmed an official investigation into Haines Dynamics for corporate fraud and retaliatory employment practices. Subpoenas were issued. Victoria's assets were frozen. The media dubbed it the fall of the God CEO. But amidst the chaos, there was one voice that rose above the noise: Elena Brooks. In her first interview after the trial, she sat down with a small local news station, not a major outlet. Her words were quiet, humble, but powerful. "I didn't go to court to destroy anyone. I just wanted the truth out there. What Judge Judy did wasn't about money. It was about reminding people that nobody, no matter how rich or powerful, is above accountability." That clip went viral too. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was real. In the months that followed, Haines Dynamics filed for bankruptcy. Its assets were auctioned off, its patents absorbed by competitors. And as the corporate empire collapsed, something remarkable happened. A new movement began to grow. Across social media, employees from tech companies, law firms, and startups began sharing their own stories under the hashtag #NoMoreGodsAtWork, a rallying cry for accountability, integrity, and fairness in leadership. Universities started referencing the case in ethics lectures. Business schools created modules called the Haines Lesson, and clips of Judge Judy's moral confrontation became required viewing in leadership seminars. Meanwhile, Elena Brooks quietly launched a non-profit organization, the Integrity Project, focused on protecting whistleblowers in corporate environments. Her GoFundMe, started by supporters after the trial, raised over $1.3 million in 2 weeks. As for Judge Judy, she never commented publicly on the case. She didn't need to. Her silence spoke volumes. But one behind-the-scenes producer from the show later revealed a small detail. After the cameras stopped rolling, Judy reportedly turned to her staff and said, "You can't fix people like that. But you can make sure the next person thinks twice before becoming one." That single sentence became the unofficial tagline of the viral phenomenon. By the end of the year, the clip had surpassed 250 million views across platforms. Victoria Haines, once worshipped as an untouchable visionary, had become a cautionary tale taught in classrooms, boardrooms, and dinner tables. Justice had not only been served, it had been televised, shared, and immortalized. And the world, even for just a moment, remembered why truth matters. The camera fades back to the empty courtroom. The chairs are vacant now. The lights have dimmed. But the echo of what happened there, the sound of that gavel, the trembling in Victoria Haines's voice, the quiet strength in Elena Brooks's eyes, still hangs in the air like smoke after a storm. Judge Judy's bench sits perfectly still. The symbol of law, of truth, of the one thing no amount of money or ego can buy: accountability. The narrator's voice comes in, calm, reflective, and firm. Every so often, the voice says, a story reminds us that justice doesn't care about status. It doesn't care about net worth, titles, or magazine covers. It cares about truth, and truth always collects its debt. Clips roll of Victoria's rise and fall, news anchors announcing her company's collapse, headlines flashing across screens, followed by Elena smiling modestly as she cuts the ribbon on the Integrity Project. This wasn't just a courtroom victory, the narration continues. It was a warning to every person who believes they're untouchable, who thinks power makes them immune to consequence. Because in the end, power doesn't protect you from the truth. It just makes your fall louder when it comes. The music swells in that slow, cinematic rise that tells viewers the story is almost over. But the lesson will linger long after. And for everyone watching at home, the narrator adds, remember this: humility costs nothing, but arrogance can cost you everything. The screen flashes one last time with Judy's viral quote from the verdict in bold white letters. "You can build empires on fear, Ms. Haines, but you can't build respect. Fear fades. Respect lasts." Then the voice shifts, the tone warming, inviting, bringing the viewers back to the familiar rhythm of the channel. If you believe Judge Judy delivered the justice Victoria Haines needed to hear, smash that like button right now. Tell us in the comments what moment hit you the hardest. The arrogance, the evidence, or that final gavel drop that shook the world. Pause. And don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell for more real stories where karma meets consequence. Because as we just saw today, arrogance might rise fast, but justice always catches up. The music fades out. The final image lingers, a slow-motion replay of the gavel striking down, cutting to black with one last line across the screen. The higher you think you are, the farther the truth will make you fall.